The fluorescent lights of Patterson Hardware hummed their eternal song overhead as Garrett Callahan ran his calloused palm along a 2x4, checking for warp the way his father had taught him 30 years ago. The grain told stories if you knew how to listen. This one ran straight and true, perfect for the platform he had been building since spring. Sawdust clung to his Carhartt work pants, the kind of honest dirt that came from actual labor, not a corporate desk. His 8-year-old daughter Willa tugged at his sleeve, 60 pounds of auburn-haired determination bouncing on her heels. She had inherited her mother's coloring, that rich copper hair, those green eyes that could see straight through any excuse he tried to make. But that stubborn chin was pure Callahan. 3 generations of hard-headed craftsmen compressed into one little girl who refused to take no for an answer. The tree house had been their project since the snow melted. Something to fill the silence that still echoed through rooms where Margot's laughter used to live. 2 years since cancer took her. 730 days of learning to be both parents at once. Garrett turned back to his measurements, pencil behind his ear, and his sleeve rode up just enough to expose a tattoo on his left inner wrist. A phoenix with one broken wing, learning to fly despite the damage. The afternoon light through the high windows caught the faded ink, and he tugged his sleeve down out of habit. Some marks were not meant for casual explanation. The design had been sketched on a coffee shop napkin when he was 26, and stupid enough to believe that matching tattoos meant forever. Serafina's idea. 2 phoenixes learning to fly together. Wings spread despite the breaks. They had gotten them inked the same day, drunk on cheap wine and cheaper promises about conquering distance and ambition. Then she had left for New York with a gallery position she could not refuse, and assurances that dissolved like sugar in rain. 3 weeks later, she stopped answering calls, blocked his number, vanished so completely it was like she had never existed beyond the mark on his skin. Garrett had done what people do. He grieved, he moved on. He met Margot at a woodworking exhibition where she spent 3 hours asking intelligent questions about dovetail joints. She had been steady where Serafina was storm, present where Serafina was always half gone. They built something real, a daughter, a home, 6 years of the kind of love that did not need dramatics to prove itself. The memory of Margot's last months still cut deep, the way she had refused bitterness even when her body betrayed her, how she had made him promise to keep living after she was gone, to not let grief turn him into a ghost haunting his own house. He had kept that promise, mostly, got up every morning, fed Willa, ran the shop, built things with his hands because that was what Callahan men did. They made something useful from raw materials, something that lasted. A small voice cut through the ambient noise of shopping carts and overhead announcements. Clear and curious in a way that made the back of his neck prickle with something he could not name. "Excuse me, sir. My mother has a tattoo just like yours." The world narrowed to a pinpoint. The pencil slipped from Garrett's fingers. The box of deck screws he had been holding hit the floor. Ball bearings scattered across concrete in a sound like his thoughts breaking apart. He turned slowly. The way you move when you are not sure you want to see what is behind you. A girl stood 3 feet away, maybe 9 years old. Navy dress with a white Peter Pan collar that screamed private school and trust funds. Patent leather shoes caught the fluorescent light. A velvet headband held back dark curls that escaped in careful disarray, the kind of styled imperfection that cost money to achieve. But her eyes. God, her eyes were the exact shape as the ones he faced every morning in the bathroom mirror. Not the color. Hers were brown where his were hazel, but the architecture underneath, the way they tilted slightly at the outer corners, the directness of her gaze, like she had already decided he was safe enough to approach. She pointed at his wrist where his sleeve had ridden up during the motion of turning. Her finger, small and precise, aimed directly at the phoenix, the bird with the broken wing that learned to fly. My mother has the same one on her shoulder. She never shows anyone, but I saw it once when she was changing. She told me it was from a long time ago, from someone important. Garrett's brain scrambled to process the impossible. The tattoo was not from any shop pattern book. It was original, drawn by two people who thought they were building something permanent. Only two existed in the world, his and hers. The girl tilted her head, waiting for a response he could not form. She had the careful posture someone had taught her, shoulders back, chin level, but underneath the polish, something vulnerable leaked through. The universal look of childhood loneliness that transcended tax brackets. Willa appeared at his elbow, curiosity overriding stranger danger. She had never met a person she did not want to befriend, and something about this polished girl in her expensive dress seemed to call out to his daughter's generous heart. "Hi, I'm Willa. That's a really pretty dress. Do you go to St. Catherine's?" The girl's attention shifted. Her formal composure cracked slightly, like ice in spring. "I'm Bellamy. I go to Riverside Academy. We don't have recess anymore. They call it structured outdoor time." Willa wrinkled her nose in that dramatic way she had inherited from Margot. "That sounds boring. We have actual recess with swings and everything." Someone dropped a paint can 3 aisles over, the clatter sharp in the Cathedral of Commerce and weekend projects. Garrett felt time slow down in that peculiar way it does before everything changes. Like the moment between lightning and thunder, when you know the strike is coming but have not felt it yet. Footsteps approached, rapid and urgent, expensive heels clicking in unmistakable rhythm against linoleum. Sharp, precise. The sound of someone who had learned to move with purpose through rooms full of people who measured worth in zeros. "Bellamy, Bellamy, where did you—" The voice cut off mid-sentence. Garrett knew it before he turned. Some sounds burrow into your bones and wait there dormant until circumstance resurrects them. He had spent a decade bearing this particular frequency, and now it rose from the grave fully formed, dragging every memory he thought safely dead. He turned slowly, each degree of rotation and exercise in controlled demolition. 10 years had refined Serafina's sharp edges into something almost dangerous. The ratty art student with paint-stained fingers had become a woman in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his truck's last service. Her dark hair, once long enough to tangle in his fingers, was cut in a severe bob that framed cheekbones he had traced with reverent hands in a different lifetime. But her eyes had not changed. Still that particular shade of gray that reminded him of October skies before rain, the kind of weather that made you want to stay inside with someone warm. Right now, those eyes were wide with something between recognition and terror, trapped in the moment where past and present collided with the force of inevitability. "Garrett." His name left her lips like a confession, like a curse, like the final word of a prayer she had been reciting for a decade without knowing how it ended. Serafina. Tasting her name after 10 years of not speaking, it felt like touching a scar that had never properly healed. The air between them turned thick and hard to breathe. Charged with everything they had done to each other in the name of love and self-preservation. Willa pressed closer to his side, confused by the tension she could sense but not name. Bellamy looked between them, her small face creased with the kind of worry children get when they sense adult complications beyond their comprehension. Serafina recovered first, features smoothing into a mask of polite distance that probably served her well in boardrooms and charity galas. "I apologize. Bellamy, we need to leave now." But Bellamy was looking at the tattoo again, then at her mother, then back to Garrett with the dawning wonder of a child piecing together a puzzle adults thought they had hidden. "Is he the one from your story?" The one about the phoenix who found another phoenix, and they learned to fly together before the storm came? Serafina's face went pale under her expensive foundation. Garrett felt something crack inside his chest, a structural failure he could not name. What story? But Serafina was already taking Bellamy's hand, already turning toward the exit with the desperate grace of someone fleeing a crime scene. I'm sorry, we have to go. This was... I'm sorry. She moved toward the door, pulling Bellamy along, but the girl looked back over her shoulder, and Garrett saw it clearly now in the afternoon light. The shape of her nose was his, the way her eyebrows arched when she was curious, the stubborn set of her jaw that he recognized from every mirror he had ever faced, the way her little finger curved slightly inward, a genetic quirk passed down through 3 generations of Callahan men. Willa's voice was small beside him. Dad, who was that lady? Why did she run away? Garrett could not answer. He was too busy calculating months, counting backward. Remembering the last night he had spent with Serafina before she disappeared. The hotel room neither of them could really afford. Rain against windows. Promises they had made about calling. About making it work despite the distance. About love being enough. 9 months. Bellamy was 9 years old. The math was simple. The implications were apocalyptic. That night Garrett sat alone on the workshop floor. The smell of cedar and old varnish wrapped around him. Familiar as breathing. He had been staring at the same knot in the floorboards for 2 hours, running calculations that always came out the same. The door creaked. Willa stood in her pajamas, 8 years old and already wise enough to know when silence was the only gift that mattered. She crossed the dusty floor and climbed into his lap without asking, fitting herself against his chest the way she had since she was small enough to cradle in one arm. They sat like that for a long time, his arms around his daughter, the weight of another daughter, a daughter he had never known existed, pressing down on him with the force of lost years and stolen moments. Finally, Willa spoke. I like that girl. Bellamy. She seemed lonely. Garrett's throat was too tight for words. He just nodded against her hair. Like she was looking for something. Her whole life. He managed to find his voice. What makes you say that, kiddo? Willa tilted her head back to look at him. Those green eyes, Margot's eyes, serious in a way that made her look older than 8. Because she looked at you the way I look at pictures of Mom. Like looking at someone she always wanted to meet but didn't know existed. The words hit him like a physical blow. He had to close his eyes against the surge of emotion, against the impossible truth that Willa could not know, but somehow sensed anyway. Children had a way of seeing what adults tried to hide, and Willa had always been particularly perceptive. I hope we see her again, Willa said softly. I've always wanted a sister. Garrett held his daughter tighter, Margot's wisdom coming back through Willa's voice, like a message from beyond the grave. Maybe his late wife had known something he did not. Maybe she had known all along that the past never stays buried, no matter how deep you dig. The farmer's market on Saturday morning should have been neutral territory. Garrett stood among the heirloom tomatoes, buying produce for the sauce Margot had taught him to make. The one recipe he had managed to master after her death because it felt like keeping a piece of her alive. He saw Serafina standing alone by the vegetable stall. No Bellamy in sight, no bodyguard, no assistant. Just a woman in jeans and a simple white shirt, examining produce with an intensity that suggested she was avoiding looking anywhere else. His feet were moving before his brain caught up. We need to talk. Serafina's eyes closed. The grief in them was old, calcified into something permanent. There's nothing to talk about. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she placed a tomato back in its basket. Garrett, please, just let this go. The words came out sharper than he intended. Let it go. Sarah, she looks exactly like me. Exactly. And you run away the second we meet. You don't think I deserve an explanation? Serafina's face was a mask, but he saw the muscles in her jaw working. the tell she had always had when trying not to cry. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth. Is Bellamy mine?" The question hung between them like smoke. For a moment, Garrett thought she might actually answer. Then something in her expression shuddered completely. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Thick, expensive cardstock. She wrote an address on the back with trembling fingers. "8 tonight. Come alone. I'll tell you everything." The address led to a neighborhood Garrett had only ever driven through on his way to somewhere else. The kind of place where houses hid behind stone walls and ancient trees. Where money was not flaunted because it did not need to be. Old money, generational wealth that predated his grandfather's woodworking business by a century or more. The gate opened at his approach. He followed a winding drive through manicured gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain, past fountains and sculptures that belonged to museums. The house itself was a modern masterpiece of glass and steel, all clean lines and soaring spaces designed to make visitors feel small. This was not art gallery curator money. This was something else entirely. Inheritance, trust funds, the kind of wealth that came with responsibilities and complications Garrett could not begin to imagine. Serafina answered the door herself, barefoot in jeans and an oversized sweater. Her hair loose around her shoulders in a way that made his chest ache with sense memory. She looked younger like this, closer to the girl he had known, the one who would laugh until she could not breathe in pain until dawn and talk about changing the world through art. "Come in." She led him through a foyer that was more gallery than home, through corridors lined with art that probably cost more than his house, to a study lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. She poured them both whiskey from a crystal decanter without asking if he wanted it, handed him a glass with shaking hands. They stood like that for a moment, not quite facing each other, the weight of 10 years pressing down on the space between them. Serafina spoke first, her voice flat with the careful control of someone who had rehearsed this speech in mirrors and empty rooms. "Her name is Bellamy Ashford. She's 9 years old. She was born on March 14th at Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. She likes art and mathematics, plays violin at a pre-conservatory level, speaks 3 languages, and has never had a birthday party with more than 2 other children present." She paused, took a long drink of whiskey. "She's also never met her father, has no idea who he is, and I've spent 9 years making sure it stayed that way." The words were meant to hurt, and they did. Garrett pushed past the pain. It was the only question that mattered. "Why?" Serafina finally turned to face him. The raw anguish in her expression made him take an involuntary step forward. "Because telling you would have destroyed everything you had. Because I left to give you a chance at a real life, not the half existence I could offer you." She set down her glass and wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small in the oversized sweater. "I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after I left. I was in New York, starting the gallery job. I took a test in a convenience store bathroom at 2 in the morning because I couldn't sleep and kept throwing up and couldn't keep pretending it was stress." Her voice cracked. She paused to collect herself. "I sat on that dirty floor with the plastic stick in my hand, and I thought about calling you. God, Garrett, I thought about it for days. I had my phone out 100 times. But then I did what I always do. I researched. I looked you up online. Checked your social media." She met his eyes, and hers were swimming. "You were engaged to Margot. You'd posted photos from a dinner where you proposed. You looked so happy, Garrett, so fundamentally at peace in a way you never looked with me." Garrett felt like the floor had dropped away. "You were pregnant with my child, and you didn't tell me because I'd moved on." The anger in his voice was sharp, but underneath it was something much more complicated. Serafina laughed, but it was bitter. "Not just moved on. You'd found what you needed. Margot was steady, present, everything I wasn't. I was chaos, Garrett. I was ambition and restlessness. I would have pulled you away from your family, your business, everything that grounded you. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. I loved you enough to let you be happy, even if it meant raising our daughter alone. The silence that followed was heavy with all the different futures that had died that day in a New York bathroom. Garrett's voice, when he finally found it, was rough. You didn't just decide for yourself, Serafina. You decided for me, for Bellamy. You took away my choice. She nodded slowly. I know, and I've lived with that guilt every single day. She turned to face him fully now, and he saw the exhaustion carved into her features. There's more you need to know. When my father died 6 months after Bellamy was born, I inherited the Ashford Foundation. Millions of dollars, property, investments, all of it tied up in trusts and legal structures. My Uncle Edmund has been looking for any excuse to contest the will since Dad died. If I acknowledge Bellamy's father and he's deemed unsuitable, the trustees can challenge her inheritance. Garrett sat down, his untouched whiskey trembling too badly to hold. So this isn't just about us and the girls. It's about money and power and family politics. Welcome to the Ashford legacy, where every choice has a dozen consequences nobody warned you about. The weeks that followed blurred together. Bellamy started coming to Garrett's workshop after school. Mrs. Cormack, the stern-faced nanny who had raised her since birth, would deliver her with minimal comment and retreat to the porch to read. The girl had clearly never used a hammer before, never touched raw lumber, never been allowed to get dirty. Garrett taught her how to check if two pieces fit flush, how to feel for gaps that the eye might miss. Her hands, small and careful from years of violin training, had the sensitivity required for precision work. When Bellamy found a slight misalignment in a joint, pride flashed across her face, the satisfaction of discovering a problem she could help solve. That's amazing, she said, her formal vocabulary slipping into wonder. It's like how violin strings are tuned in perfect fifths because of harmonic resonance. Garrett had no idea what harmonic resonance meant in musical terms, but he recognized the intellectual hunger behind the comparison. This girl who had grown up with everything money could buy was starving for something else entirely. Connection, purpose, the satisfaction of making something with her own hands. Willa arrived 20 minutes later, breathless from running. She dumped her backpack and immediately started explaining the treehouse plans she had been refining on notebook paper during math class. The two girls gravitated toward each other with magnetic pull. Willa showed Bellamy how to draw plans in the dirt with a stick. Bellamy asked questions about structural integrity. They spoke different languages, Willa's vocabulary from hands-on experience, Bellamy's from books and formal education. But they understood each other perfectly. Garrett watched them together and felt something fundamental shift in his chest. They could be sisters. They moved the same way, tilted their heads at the same angle when thinking. Willa's coloring came from Margot, that auburn hair and fair skin, while Bellamy was darker like Serafina. But underneath the surface differences, the architecture was identical. The shape of their hands, the way they both bit their lower lip when concentrating, the stubborn set of their shoulders when they decided something mattered. The first dinner together was chaotic in the best way. Bellamy had never helped cook, never set a table, never been told that everyone in a family contributes what they can. When she tried to grate Parmesan and cut her knuckle on the third pass, Garrett was there in a second with a clean dish towel and antiseptic. First rule of the kitchen, he said, bandaging her small finger with practiced efficiency. The grater always wins. Second rule, everyone gets hurt learning. Third rule, you get back up and finish the job. Bellamy watched his hands with something like wonder. You're gentle for someone with such big hands. Woodworking teaches you precision. You learn to be gentle with things that matter. She was quiet for a moment, then so softly he almost missed it. No one's ever bandaged me like this before. At home, they call the doctor, and there it was. The moment Garrett understood what 9 years of wealth and absence had cost his daughter. She had everything money could buy, but no one had ever taught her that small wounds were part of learning, that getting hurt and getting back up was how you became strong. The cracks appeared 2 weeks later. Willa came home from school with tears streaming down her face and a note from her teacher requesting a parent meeting. Aggressive behavior toward classmates, talking back, disruption during reading time. Willa, his even-tempered daughter who had never gotten in trouble beyond forgetting homework, had pushed another girl off the monkey bars. She said I was weird because I don't have a mom, Willa sobbed into his shirt. She said her mom told her you probably can't take care of me right. Garrett held her tight, fury at small-minded parents warring with concern for his daughter. You know that's not true. I know, but then I thought about Bellamy and how she doesn't have a dad, and people probably say mean things about her too. And I just got so mad. That afternoon, Willa's mood turned dark. She refused to play with her favorite toys, drew angry scribbles in black crayon, and when Garrett tried to engage her, she exploded. Why does Bellamy get to come here so much? You smile different when she's here. The accusation landed like a punch. What do you mean? Willa's face crumpled. I don't know. Sometimes I just want it to be just us again, like before Mom died, just me and you. Garrett knelt in front of his daughter, took her small hands in his larger ones. Nothing and nobody will ever change how much I love you. You're my Willa. You held my hand through losing your mom. You taught me how to keep living when I wanted to stop. There is no universe where anyone matters more to me than you do. Willa sniffled, unconvinced. But Bellamy needs you more. She never had a dad. Having another person to care about doesn't divide love, kiddo. It multiplies. My heart doesn't have a limit on how much room it has. That's cheesy, Dad. A small smile broke through her tears. You're right, it is. But it's also true. They set a date to tell the girls the truth. Saturday afternoon, Dr. Alara Chen, the child psychologist, had given them a framework. Be honest but age-appropriate. Let them react however they need to react. Do not try to control their emotions. The morning arrived with perfect weather that felt like mockery. Serafina's Mercedes pulled into the driveway at 12:15, 15 minutes late. Garrett watched her sit in the driver's seat for a full minute after parking, gathering courage, or maybe saying goodbye to the version of her life that was about to end. They sat the girls on the couch. Willa and Bellamy side by side, unconsciously presenting a united front against whatever was coming. Garrett forced the words out before courage failed completely. Willa, you know how you've always said you wished you had a sister? You do. Bellamy is your sister. The silence was absolute. Serafina continued, her voice shaking. Bellamy, do you remember the stories I told you about your father? About the kind man who liked building things? Garrett is that man. He's your father, too. Bellamy's face cycled through confusion, hope, disbelief, and finally a desperate kind of joy that made Garrett's chest feel too small for his heart. You're my dad? You're the one from the stories? She launched herself off the couch and into his arms with the force of 9 years of wanting. She hit his chest hard enough to knock him back a step, her small body shaking with sobs as she clung to him, like he might disappear if she loosened her grip. I knew it. I knew when I saw the tattoo. I knew you were him. Mommy, I knew. Garrett caught her, held her, felt his daughter crying against his shirt while his own tears fell into her dark hair. But Willa had not moved. She sat frozen on the couch, face working through emotions too complex for an 8-year-old to name. You lied, her voice cracked on the accusation. You all lied. She was off the couch and running before anyone could stop her. Footsteps pounding up the stairs. door slamming with the finality of trust breaking. Bellamy went still in Garrett's arms, her joy already dimming as she processed Willa's reaction. Does Willa hate me now? No, baby, she doesn't hate you. She's just scared and hurt and doesn't understand yet. Can I call you that? Dad? The question broke him. You can call me whatever feels right. Dad. I want to call you Dad. The family therapy session came 2 weeks later. All four of them crammed into Dr. Chen's office. Dr. Chen looked at Willa. Can you tell me how you felt when you found out Bellamy was your sister? Willa picked at the arm of her chair. Confused, mad, scared. Scared of what? That Dad would like her better because she's new and interesting and I'm just regular. Bellamy made a small, wounded sound. Dr. Chen turned to her. Bellamy, what did you feel when you found out Garrett was your father? Happy, really, really happy. Like I'd been missing something my whole life, and suddenly it was there. Her voice dropped. And now scared that I made Willa's life worse. Dr. Chen looked at both girls. You're not enemies. You're not even really competing. You're two girls who both lost or never had something and found each other in the middle of that loss. Willa lost her mother. Bellamy never had a father. But now you have a chance to help each other instead of making each other's pain worse. The shift was not instant, but something loosened in the room. Some of the defensive tension bleeding out as both girls considered the possibility that they did not have to be adversaries. Friday night. Both girls sleeping over at Garrett's house for the first time since the revelation. The nightmare hit around 3 in the morning. Bellamy's screams woke the entire house, high and terrified and completely inconsolable. By the time Garrett got upstairs, she was thrashing in her sleeping bag, caught in some dream he could not reach. He knelt beside her, called her name until she surfaced enough to recognize him. Even then, it took 15 minutes of breathing exercises before she could speak. I dreamed you forgot about me, that I came to visit and you didn't remember who I was. Her voice was small and broken, 9 years of abandonment fears condensing into one terrible image. That's not going to happen, I promise. I'm not going anywhere, Bellamy. I'm your dad. That doesn't change. Willa climbed down from her bed, crawled into the sleeping bag next to Bellamy without asking permission. I get bad dreams too, about my mom disappearing and my dad forgetting to come home. But Dad's always there when I wake up. He'll be there for you too. Bellamy turned to look at Willa, both girls' faces tear-stained and exhausted. You promise? Yeah. And if you have bad dreams, I'll wake you up. That's what sisters do. The word hung between them, tentative and new. Bellamy reached for Willa's hand, and Willa let her take it. They fell asleep like that, tangled together. Holding on. The legal papers arrived on Tuesday. Edmund Ashford, Seraphina's uncle, was filing for guardianship review, citing concerns about Garrett's suitability as a parent, his working-class background, his lack of resources to maintain Bellamy's standard of living. Hector found Garrett sitting on the workshop floor, papers scattered around him, too angry to speak. What's that? Rich people trying to take my daughter away because I'm not rich enough to deserve her. Hector picked up one of the legal documents, squinted at the dense language. So you roll over, let them win because they have deeper pockets? Garrett looked at his old friend, the man who had known him since he was Willa's age. What am I supposed to do? Same thing your dad would do. Stand up and fight for what's yours. Your girl needs you. That's worth more than any trust fund. Mrs. Cormack found him at a coffee shop the next morning. The stern-faced nanny who had watched over Bellamy since birth sat across from him with an intensity that made him nervous. Mr. Callahan, we should talk. I've known since Bellamy was born. Garrett froze. Known what? That you're her father. I was Victoria's family housekeeper before I became the nanny. I was there the day she came home from the hospital with a newborn. I saw the tattoo when I helped her bathe after the C-section. I heard her cry at night about someone named Garrett. She reached into her purse and slid an envelope across the table. If Miss Serafina loses her nerve, give her this. Inside were baby photos. Bellamy at the hospital. Bellamy at 3 months. A note in Mrs. Cormack's careful handwriting. Some secrets protect, some secrets poison. You'll know which this is. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm retiring in 3 months and I won't be there to help Bellamy through what comes next. She needs her father, Mr. Callahan. She's always needed him. The courtroom was packed. Edmund Ashford sat with his team of expensive lawyers, his face arranged in an expression of concerned familial duty that fooled no one who looked closely enough. Patricia Chen, Garrett's pro bono attorney, stood up. Your Honor, I have evidence regarding the plaintiff's true motivation. She presented emails. Edmund consulting with lawyers about how to challenge the will. Discussions about the opportunity presented by the revelation of Bellamy's father's identity. Mr. Ashford, is it true that if Bellamy were disinherited, the trust fund would transfer to you as the next male heir? The courtroom murmured. Edmund's face went red. Sweat beaded on his forehead. That's not... My concern is purely for... Serafina stood, her voice trembling but clear. Uncle Edmund, you've been waiting for this opportunity for 9 years. You don't care about Bellamy. You only want the money Dad left behind. The judge looked at Edmund with undisguised contempt. Mr. Ashford, I see clearly the true motivation here. Your petition is denied with prejudice, and I recommend the Foundation Board review your role in any decisions regarding Ashford assets. Edmund left the courtroom in humiliation, face purple with rage, avoiding the eyes of everyone present while cameras flashed. DNA results confirmed what Garrett had known the moment he saw Bellamy pointing at his tattoo. 97% probability, his name was added to her birth certificate. 9 years late, she was officially Bellamy Ashford Callahan. 1 year later, Patterson Hardware, the same aisle where everything began. Garrett stood among the lumber with both his daughters, buying supplies for the garden shed they had decided to build next. Willa and Bellamy walked ahead, arguing about whether they needed more nails. Bellamy turned back. Dad, Willa says we're overbuying, but I calculated the surface area and we definitely need 3 more boxes. Willa rolled her eyes. She calculated wrong. Dad's estimate is always right. Is not. Is too. Garrett smiled, watching them bicker with the comfortable familiarity of siblings who had forgotten they had not always known each other. A woman passed with a small child. Did a double take at the identical mannerisms, the way both girls tilted their heads when arguing, the stubborn set of their jaws. Are they twins? Willa and Bellamy looked at each other and burst out laughing. No, we're just sisters. Same dad, different moms. It's complicated, but good complicated. That night, Garrett stood in his workshop, finishing 3 small carved phoenixes he had started months ago. Willa's was cherrywood, warm and familiar. Bellamy's was walnut, rich and deep. His was oak, solid and weathered. Different materials, same design, stronger together than apart. He traced the phoenix tattoo on his wrist one last time. Across town, Serafina had the same design on her shoulder, hidden under professional clothes, but there nonetheless. 2 phoenixes who had learned to fly together, crashed, burned, and somehow found their way back to something better than what they had lost. Garrett turned off the workshop lights and walked into the house where his daughter slept, where tomorrow they would wake up and fight over breakfast and build something new together. Some families were born, some were made, and some were torn apart and reassembled by sheer stubborn refusal to give up, by children brave enough to point at truth when they see it, by the recognition that love does not divide, it multiplies, making room for everyone who needs a place to belong. The phoenix had learned to fly again. All of them had.